Flint Burns is one of the great enigmas here at the Fireside Tales. A few months back I told you all the story of how he solved the mystery of the cult of the Mesmers, and tonight I'm telling an altogether different case. However, I should mention that I do not know where these files are coming from. The organization has refused to divulge that information. I will state that I have my own hypothesis, however I want all of you to be the judge. What do you think is going on here? And who do you think is Flint Burns? Perhaps this folder should shed some light on it. It is titled Flint Burns and the Case of the Diamond of the Eternals. Written by Marilyn Harker, the person who knew him best, however, that's not saying much, as no one knew really anything about him. It begins with a brief description of the friendship between the three of them, and how they were always trying to solve who exactly Flint Burns was, even though this was a mystery that was unsolved for the rest of their days. I met him when I was in high school and took an instant liking to him. My brother Simon also had a fondness for him and said that he was fascinated by his character. I will comply with that. The three of us did everything together. We would go out into the woods and throw sticks and stones. Or he might go to his shack and read books, and I might play him in a game of chess. And I will state that I never did learn exactly where he came from, or who he was, whether he had any parents, or whether his accent was fake. On the subject of the first, I will state that I never did see his parents. My father, John Harker, even tried to call Child Protective Services, only for them to tell him that Flint Burns did indeed have parents, and that they were just very shy folks, and that John needed to quit sticking his nose into business that was none of his affairs, whatever that meant. If I knew anything for certain about Flint Burns, it was that he was always trying to be the best person he could be. Every single moment of his life he spent trying to make himself smarter or more athletic. He read every single book in his library, books on literature and science and history. He had an especial fondness for stories of superstition and ghost. Not that he believed in these things, his entire life he was an atheist, but he said that they sparked his imagination, made him question what was really going on in these tales. He also loved exercising, and every morning he would get up and take a long 9-mile run, and then he might lift some weight afterwards. Of course, these would be on the weekends when he would lift weights. Other days he'd just wait till school was out. He even once told me that he preferred exercise to intelligence. For you see, Marilyn Harker, he said in that British accent of his, the body is a faithful dog. It does what it's supposed to do. If you tell it to jump, it jumps. If you tell it to run, it runs. While the mind is a trickster, it's always doing what it isn't supposed to be doing, and you can never truly trust it. But you have to, as the mind is you. I'm not sure if I understood what he meant by this, but I can't say that I didn't think he had a point. But I do believe there was, at one time where his entire philosophy on life changed. And it occurred one rainy day in May, when the three of us were sitting in his shack, and me and him were playing a game of chess. And as we were sitting there, we heard the doorbell ring. Well, Flint Burns got up and said that he would answer it, and I couldn't help but feel something foreboding, as if there was a great evil standing at our porch, and I was about to tell him not even to answer it, but by then it was too late. He had pulled open the door to reveal a man, dressed in a trench coat and a wide-brimmed hat. He was an older fellow, and there was something both evil in his eyes, but also very proud, as if this was a man that had conquered empires and created entire industries all on his own. There were also two other men standing behind this man. They were big fellows, Grello-like, and they were both dressed in suits and had solemn expressions on their faces. But I could also sense a bit of fear in their eyes, as if even these two great men were afraid of the man standing in front of them. "May I come in, Mr. Burns?" And Flint Burns said, "Yes, of course." My brother motioned to me, and I realized that he seemed quite worried. So I asked Flint Burns if just for a moment we might have some privacy, and Flint Burns said, "Oh, I must speak to my friend here. Would you just excuse me for just a second?" We all ran into the kitchen, and Simon explained. "Flint, I happen to know who that man is. I saw him from some files from my father. Apparently he was one of the great criminals of his age, and he got arrested, but he was just recently released from prison. And I do believe this fellow isn't anyone you want to mess with." Flint Burns seemed to be thinking about this, and Simon explained how this Hunter Adams had been able to make his money from his family business, and that he had invested millions in this company to get billions. And as Flint Burns listened, Simon finally told him, "Whatever this man is up to, it isn't any good." But Flint Burns decided that he wanted to hear him out, and said he didn't want to be rude to the guest. After all, he was waiting. So the three of us ran back out, and I will confess that I myself was completely against even talking to this man, as I remembered him from my father's file now that Simon had mentioned it. But we all sat down at the table, and Hunter Adams began. I am sorry to intrude. You see, I have heard about all the things that you have done, the Boulevard case, and I believe that you are the man that is going to be able to help me. There are some here," and he turned towards his bodyguards, and they looked down at the ground, "that say that the young can't do anything, that the young don't have the minds capable of understanding such circumstances. However, I was able to invest in a company that made my family billions, and I have no doubt in my mind that the young are the new world, that they are going to be the ones that change everything. Besides, how old could you be? Or 16, 17, whatever. I am bringing this case to you, and I think it might interest you." He pulled open the briefcase and pulled out a folder, and Flint Burns began looking at it. "What exactly is this?" "You see," said Hunter Adams, "an unfortunate tragedy happened. After I had been wrongly convicted and put in jail, my family heirloom was stolen." And Flint Burns looked up and said, Your family heirloom?" "Yes," said Hunter Adams. "We'd had it in the family since the 1980s, if you can believe that. But anyways," he grabbed the folder from him, "it is a priceless artifact." And he showed him the picture, and when we looked at it, the three of us, Simon, Flint, and me, couldn't help but feel a mystical feeling at this object. For there on the page was, "The Diamond of the Eternals," said Hunter Adams. "It was as big as the Hope Diamond, 70 carats, a beautiful thing." And he began to flip through the pages. "I was able to call up some some private detectives of mine," and he sort of smirked at this, and we looked at each other, wondering exactly what he could be smirking about, "who were able to state that they kind of figured out how he got in. You see, he must have bypassed the home security system that I have. But there was a problem." Flint Burns began looking through the file. "Yes, I see. Your security cameras had footage put on in a loop. You were fooled by a lapse in the film." "That's right," said Hunter Adams. "These two dunderheads here must have been hacked into." And both the bodyguards looked down at the ground again. "But that is all right," said Hunter Adams. "For I do think I already know who it could be. It's probably one of my rival companies. I've had quite a few problems with them in the past." Flint Burns looked over it and said, "So, I would like to ask you something. Was there any forced entry into the house? Like, did you notice that the door was broken into?" "No," said Hunter Adams. "That's the mysterious thing about him. The door was absolutely fine. There was no scratches or anything. And we had the diamond on a weight pressure system, but I suppose they must have found a way to fool that." Well, Flint Burns looked at it and said, "Well, I'm not quite sure if I can take your case, but then again there is something that interests me about it. All right, Mr. Adams, I will give it a go. However, I have one condition. I want one thing from you. No rules attached." And Hunter Adams said, "Of course. You have my word." And he shook hands with him, and said that he expected the results here very soon. Well, anyways, the three of them left, and I said to him, "Flint, do you think you know exactly who it could be? I was thinking about it, and maybe there's some folks that my father could talk to in the underworld that might be able to help you out." And Flint said, "No, I think I already sort of know what's going on here, although it is a very unusual case. First, we will have to head to the library." So the three of us walked there, and Simon, as we were walking, went up to me and said, I don't know about this, Marilyn. I've always loved Flint, of course, but Father did say that he might have been some kind of runaway, or he might be connected to some drugs, and it is weird how these gangsters will sometimes come up to his door. And what do you think the one favor could possibly be? He's accepting blood money. Hunter Adams is a known killer, or at least that's what the people say. I will confess I didn't know what to think of this, but I finally told Simon that we just had to trust our friend, and that I was sure that he wasn't a criminal, or that he couldn't be. At least I hoped. Anyways, we arrived at the library, and Flint seemed to be taking some long time looking through the books, and he was looking through the files, and finally he said, "Aha, here it is," and he pulled up a book, and he didn't show it to us. I'll leave it as a surprise to you what's going on here. But we were going to pay a visit to Rodriguez Resorts. We all started to, we had to take a cab to get there. But as we were driving, Flint Burns explained, "You see, I'm willing to tell you this little bit of what's going on. The Rodriguezes used to work for Hunter Adams. They used to be the gardeners there. And it is quite possible that they had a key, or a key made. After all, they would have had to been able to get into the house. And if I were to make a guess, I'd say that Hunter Adams hid the diamond in the house, but never told anyone about it. Maybe that he's been keeping it secret. It would explain why there was a lack of the diamond in any, written work. This was a very secreted thing. But maybe they stumbled upon it, and decided they would steal it. But then again, there are a few more questions here that need to be answered." Anyways, eventually we arrived at Rodriguez Resort, and we went up to the door, and Flint Burns knocked. And the moment that he did so, a man answered. This man had hair that was disheveled, and he looked like he was in a state of blind panic. "Hello," he said. What do you children want?" "My name is Flint Burns, and you are Matthew Rodriguez. You used to work for Hunter Adams. I'm afraid an unfortunate circumstance has occurred, but I might be able to help you." Matthew looked at him and said, "Please come in." Well, we walked in, and we saw all these sort of pictures on the wall, and the man himself, Matthew Rodriguez, was quite rich now at this point. Not super rich, but definitely had a bit of fair money. And anyways, there was another man sitting in there who was quite handsome. He looked like he might have been a model, and I later did discover that he was one. His name was Edward, and he was holding a bottle of whiskey, and Flint Burns said, "Oh, you seem to be in quite a panic. What could be going on here?" Matthew said, "It's none of your concern, but you said Hunter sent you? I have heard of you. Your name's Flint Burns, right? You solved the Boulevard mystery." "That's right. And he brought me here because he believes that you didn't mean to steal the diamond. He knows exactly what's going on." "Yes," said Matthew. "It's true. My brother Edward here can be a bit of a hothead." And Edward smiled. "I did what you didn't have the bravery to do. We've been at war with Hunter Adams for years. He never paid my brother right, and he walked out on him. And I decided one night, why not just get our revenge? After all, Matthew here did accidentally steal one of the keys and had to have it replaced." And anyways, he took a drink. "You fool, he's going to suspect us," said Matthew. "That whole key incident's going to stick out in his mind, and he's going to come and have us shot up. And you taking that diamond?" "Yes," said Flint Burns. "But I must say, you all seem to be a bit more panicked than you should be. After all, you could probably just have it returned, have it thrown at his doorstep, and there'd probably be nothing more thought of it." "Well, that's the problem," said Matthew. "The diamond's gone." And the three of us looked at each other for a moment, and Flint Burns said, The diamond was stolen. Ah, yes, that does make sense. My friend, I don't think you have any reason to worry. I will make sure that the two of you are not killed by this Hunter Adams. If you will just give me a few moments, I'll have the whole thing set up. However, I would appreciate it if you would come by his house, Friday, tomorrow, at 8. Matthew didn't like the sound of this, but Flint Burns said, "My dear friend, I promise you can trust me from one fellow to another." Well, anyways, Matthew, he shook his head and said, well, I'll see what I can do. If my brother hadn't been such an idiot, I've always trusted Wilson more. You never should have been allowed into this family business." Matthew just shrugged his shoulder and continued drinking his beer. Well, anyways, Flint, took us to one more place. He went over to a pawn shop that he happened to know about, and he talked to the man there for a little while, although we didn't hear what he said, for we were waiting in the cab. He came back and said, "Well, there's nothing else for us to do, I'm afraid. I think I'm going to go out on a run for a little while, and I'll see you all later. See you all tomorrow, actually, 8 o'clock, at Hunter Adams' house." And anyways, Simon said, "Well, did you figure out where the diamond is?" "No," said Flint Burns. "I have no idea where it is, and I probably won't be able to find it. But we will do what we can." And anyways, he said, "But it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter. I will see you all soon." He dropped us off at our father's house, and as we went to bed, we couldn't help but worry about what was going on, and we couldn't help but fear for Flint Burns' life, as Hunter Adams might have him killed if he found out that he knew where it was but wasn't telling him, or if something were to go wrong. Hunter Adams was known to be a temperamental fellow, and he killed first and asked questions later. But the next day we did as we were told. We waited till 8 o'clock at night, and John wasn't very happy about us leaving, but he finally agreed, as long as he was allowed to go with us. So we went down to the house, and we came up to Flint Burns, and the three of us went inside, and Hunter Adams was very polite as we all sat down. John wasn't very happy about us talking to a criminal, but Flint Burns had been able to convince him on the phone that the man was, he was found innocent of his crimes, and that there was no reason to be afraid, and for whatever reason, my father had trusted him. But anyways, Flint Burns stood up and said, "Well, Mr. Adams, I have discovered where the diamond is. I was hoping our friends, Matthew and Edward, would come down, but I'm afraid they are a bit too fearful. It doesn't matter at any rate." And Hunter Adams said, "Well, do you know where the diamond is?" "Yes," he said. "It is very close to me, in fact." And he pulled it out of his pocket and revealed it to us all. And we looked at it for a moment, and Hunter Adams said, "My goodness, I knew it! I knew this boy was a legend." And he got up and he grabbed hold of the diamond. Well, I suppose I should explain exactly what is going on here. Matthew and Edwards had it stolen. They had the video lapsed, and they were able to get in. However, we had a deal with each other, Mr. Adams. "And?" said Hunter, as he was studying the diamond, making sure that it was in its right condition, for whatever reason, as it was But anyways, Flint Burns said, "You said that you would do one favor for me, and my favor is that I do not want you to hurt Matthew and Edward Rodriguez." Hunter Adams looked up. "No, they committed a crime against my family. This is about pride. This is about what this diamond here represents." And Flint Burns said, "Ah, yes, but you are a man of your word, are you not?" "Well," said Hunter, "I suppose that is true. Very well, I will do this. I'm against doing it, but I will. I'll have to put this thing under better security." "You won't be needing to put it under any security at all," said Flint Burns. "The truth of the matter is that diamond is not real." "What?" said Hunter Adams. "Of course it's real. It's been in the family since—" "Yes, the 80s, I know," said Flint Burns. "However, the truth of the matter is that your family was conned. It happens from time to time. People think they're buying a priceless artifact, only to find out years later that it was a fraud. This diamond here is about the size of the Hope Diamond, as you mentioned, and you said it was 70 carats. The moment you said this, I realized that the weight didn't match the size. It shouldn't be this heavy. This is actually a fake." And he pulled out the gourd and he showed it to him. "I even talked to one of the pawn stop people, and they were quick to confirm my suspicions. This is no real diamond." Hunter Adams, he put it down for a second, and he said, I can't believe it. "You should have had it looked into," said Flint Burns, "but I suppose you were too trusting of your own family. At any rate, the mystery is solved." And he went, and so the three of us ended up leaving after Hunter Adams did indeed say a few polite words, although I don't think he said them very happily. And he did mention to Flint as he was leaving, "You know, if you are a good boy, but if there's one problem with you, it's your weakness. You don't realize that certain individuals like Edward and Matthew are cockroaches in this world, and that they must be destroyed. I suppose it's a lesson that you must learn later in your life. But I will stay true to my promise. That I can assure you." Well, as we left, Flint Burns laughed. "I do not believe Hunter Adams is as bright of a fellow as his money would suggest. You see, the truth of the matter is, he was also robbed by his bodyguards." And I looked at him and said, "What? How did that happen?" I didn't want to tell him because I didn't want them fired or killed. But his two bodyguards were almost certainly the ones that messed with the tape, the security cameras, and put on the laps. I was reviewing the laps from the file, and I noticed that it would be pretty obvious for anyone to notice that the cameras had been tricked while they were watching it. Here's what I think happened. When the bodyguards saw Matthew and Edward stealing the diamond, they decided they wanted revenge on Hunter for all the years of hard work they put in without as much reward as they suspected. So they followed them and stole the diamond from them in the night. Then, when they went to the pawn shop and discovered that it wasn't a real thing, they threw it over a bridge and into a creek. I was able to figure out which pawn shop it was sold at and figure out a place where it was likely they would have thrown it. It was kind of a chance in a million that I'd find it, and was very lucky that I did. However, even if I hadn't, I could still have explained that the whole thing was a fake." "Wow," said Marilyn. "So it was the bodyguards that stole the diamond after all." "In a way," said Flint Burns, "although there was quite a lot of guilt in this story. And I can't help but admit that it is sort of humorous to me. Everyone looking for something in this world that didn't even exist to begin with." And he smiled at this, and from that moment on I did notice quite a change in Flint Burns' life. The diamonds of the Eternal, a case I think that will stand out in his mind for a long time. And that is all the folder said. As always, sweet dreams and good night. I hope you find the diamond that you're searching for, but most likely you will not.